Well, closer to home now, where we are witnessing the biggest media reforms since the 1980s. TVNZ and RNZ are merging next year, and the legislation is working its way through the Parliament right now. Leading the reforms is former New Zealand First MP Tracey Martin. Tēnā koe, welcome to the show, Tracey.
Kia ora.
Okay, so we have been looking at this for a while. You have been looking at it certainly for quite a long while now. We've been turning it all over, and I suppose I keep coming back to the question, why are we doing this?
Sure.
Because we don't seem to know.
Which is interesting, so we have to keep repeating the why. I certainly understand that. Those in the media will know that there has been a massive change inside the international and domestic ecosystem in the last decade alone. There are people here now that are playing inside the media space that we didn't even know about 10 years ago. So there's been a disruptor. Part of the reason for doing this is the fact that that disruptor internationally is having an impact on what's happening here in New Zealand. We're seeing a drop in linear audiences. We're seeing a drop in sort of AM, FM radio audiences. Our people are going other places. And we need our public media to be in those places so that our people, all of New Zealanders, can hear and see themselves across those multiple platforms. So
did Radio New Zealand come to you and say, we need help? Or did TVNZ come to the government and say, we need your help with this problem? Or is it a government intervention here?
No, I think if you actually go back to before COVID, the whole of the media sector actually came to the government and said, we have got a problem. There is a massive disruptor coming from Facebook and Google and so on and so forth. That led to work around how do we make sure that our public media is sustainable into the future in the places where it needs to be. And that was the original Cabinet paper in 2020, which led on to the business case, which led on to the piece of work that we're doing now.
Right, I want to talk to you just a little bit about that too, because we are spending $370 million on this. And as Melissa Lee points out, that Kiwis actually have, we can talk about the numbers, no idea what they're getting for that money because there was no cost-benefit analysis done. Why not?
That's not quite correct, actually. So first of all...
The dollars?
Both of those things, actually. So first of all, there's $40 million over a 3-year period being invested on the change and transition. And some of that is around aligning administrative systems, aligning job descriptions and payroll and so on. The $309 million, or $27 million, which is made up of $109 million each year for the next 3 years, is around the infrastructure investment that both RNZ and TVNZ would need independently if they were remaining independent to be on the platforms where New Zealanders are. So it's not costing $370 million to do a merger. This is not a merger. This is creating something new.
Yes. This
is not RNZ and TVNZ on steroids. This entity has to do more.
But it is costing $300 million and we haven't done a cost-benefit analysis for that.
Well, actually, the business case, Treasury said there was no need to do a cost regulatory impact statement because the business case had a strategic case, a financial case, a commercial case, and also explained the why. So Treasury said it's all been covered in the business case.
So did you look at, because a regulatory impact statement would look at things like the impact on the market and multiple models. Was the impact on the market looked at in that business case? Do you know what the impact on the market will be of this merger?
It's not a merger, it's creating a new entity. And because I have to keep saying that, because the commercial sector, I suppose, is looking at this as TVNZ on steroids. That's really what they are worried about. And the fact is that we are creating a public media entity that is partially supported by commercial revenue. It has to do more for the underserved and underengaged.
And I want to get to that.
It is not TVNZ on steroids.
I do want to get to that. But have you looked at what impact this will have on the media industry?
We have. That's why we've put in the collaboration clause. That's why we've had conversations with every part of the sector, both as when we are doing the business case and also in this work of the Establishment Board. I've been and spoken to all of the major players out in the media sector to make sure we knew what their concerns were and how could we develop in the 4 pieces of work. The legislation is just one piece of work. We've got other pieces going on.
Yes. So what could the impact be on the media landscape of this new entity?
Well, the purpose of the new entity is actually to support the overall New Zealand media ecosystem, to support it to be able to counter what is the international threat from the major international conglomerates.
But what could the impact be on the other players here, the other local players here?
So the other local players, for example, conversations that we've had with Stuff, for example, where they have local reporters, their fear is that this entity would open an office next door to them and wipe them out because they're bigger. Whereas this entity is required not to go and open an office next door to them. It is required to go and talk to them and say, what is a partnership that we can do that would support your people in your regional offices to do more? It'll be a financial relationship because it's a commercial relationship. But then how do we actually perhaps take some of the news that you're producing in Gore and spread it across some of our platforms so that the people in Auckland know what's happening with the people in Gore?
But can you rule out, for example, that this will not negatively impact other media organisations and that nobody will go to the wall as a result of this? Can you rule that out?
Well, all I can...
Because there could be unintended consequences, couldn't there?
Well,
which is what a regulatory impact statement looks at.
Well, and that's why we looked at it as part of the business case, what was happening in the ecosystem and where the greatest threat was. That's why this entity is not only has collaboration in its charter, we are developing the monitoring framework by which this entity will be held to account on its behaviour. That's why the Commerce Commission still has oversight over this entity once it is formed.
So can you rule out that this will not negatively impact other media organisations or that nobody will go to the wall?
That is not the goal. So
you can't rule it out.
I can't predict the future, but that is not the goal, and we are putting in as much of the protections as we can in the monitoring and funding work stream, and the transition and change work stream, and in the other work streams we are doing.
But that must worry you, if that is even a possibility, because what you're looking for is greater plurality of voices and a diverse media system, and if one of the unintended consequences could be that reduces plurality, that must concern you.
It would if that was what I thought was going to happen. But at the moment, RNZ and TVNZ are competing with what are these commercial entities. And this is actually changing one of them from a fully commercial entity that is fully competing to a public media entity that is partially funded by commercial revenue. So it's actually going to be less commercial.
Okay. I want to talk to you about what it is all going to look like. I just want to bring up very quickly here Stuff's Sinead Boucher. She is calling it a chilling prospect and a serious threat. Is anyone listening to that?
Well, I've read Sinead's full submission. I've had at least 2 or 3 conversations with Sinead. I understand what her concerns are. They are predicting future behaviour on past behaviour of one of the entities. I understand that. I have given as much guarantee as I can, and inside the work streams that we are doing, we are working with them to try and give them as much transparency as we can as decisions are made. But ultimately, they won't believe me till they see the way that this entity behaves. And I can't prove it till we can do it.
OK. I want to talk about the way this entity is going to behave now. What will viewers see that is different, or audiences, I suppose, on the radio or on television, that is different in this new entity?
So on the 1st of March, which is the date that technically the entity comes into place, nothing. So the Radio New Zealand staff, they're all lifting and shifting across, and they will go to work and deliver just the way they have. Same for TVNZ staff, right? The new entity doesn't gain any of its new funding until the 1st of July 2023. There needs to be a new entity board that has statutory powers to make decisions. They'll have to employ a CE. So in the first instance, nothing. What we are doing is we are working on what we hope to provide the entity board with is 3 or 4 opportunities where we see you can put quick runs on the board to deliver on the charter and show the New Zealand public why they are funding this. And
what are they?
Well, that might be children. Wouldn't be a surprise to anybody that I've got a particular focus on children. It's not an area that we compete with many in the commercial sector, but it is an area where New Zealand children are getting less and less of their own voice and their own stories up on the screen. Another area might be, and the entity doesn't have to do all this itself. So the entity can partner, let's say, with Pacifica Radio Trust, who are already delivering wonderfully to, say, in 14 Pacifica languages. How can we partner with them and say, what resourcing might you need from us for you to be able to do what you do more? And we can use that, they can use that relationship to say, we've delivered on that charter outcome through our partnership here.
Right, so more perhaps Pacifica programs, more children's programs?
And then I would say there's got to be a greater relationship with whakaruru hau iwi radio, for example. How can we support them to do more? It's all about relationships. Every sector lead that I went and saw used the term partnership, used the term relationship.
But you don't need an entity to do that, do you? Because you could easily achieve that in the current system via New Zealand On Air.
No, you can't actually.
Why not?
Well, because first of all, New Zealand On Air doesn't have a platform specific, and we're talking to the ABC and BBC and Canadians and the French and so on.
What do you mean by that platform specific?
Well, they have a content mandate, so they don't have a requirement that the New Zealand content has to be shown on a New Zealand platform. All right, so they can.
But you could do that. You could easily do that with New Zealand On Air. You could say we need to be shown on a New Zealand platform.
And that is one of the things that we were hoping that we would have this conversation in the sort of a triangular conversation with Te Māngai Pāhua, New Zealand On Air, and the establishment board around the relationship by which all of those three entities can get visibility over the commissioning, because this entity will direct commission in some ways. Visibility over the commissioning. Where should we partner so that if we need another drama and we've all got a bit of money in a different pot, how do we put that together so that New Zealanders can see New Zealand drama?
I suppose what I'm saying, though, is that you could have achieved these outcomes via New Zealand On Air and opened it up to the whole media sector as it is. You could easily say, I want more children's programs, I want them on that platform, I'm going to ring-fence that funding, and the producers would chase that money.
But that's only one of the things that we need to address. You would still have RNZ and TVNZ needing massive investment to actually lift themselves into these other platforms. Why would the New Zealand taxpayer pay twice for exactly the same things, whereas by creating the new entity, bringing those entities and the best of them underneath, you do that spend once?
I want to ask you too about public interest programming. Would F-Boy be public interest programming?
Well,
it's captured the imagination of a nation.
Yes, it has. It certainly has. That's not for me to say. That is for the entity to set a strategic direction, for the CE to then take that strategic direction, and for those who are inside the entity to decide whether they believe that meets its charter obligations. They have to measure it against its charter obligations. Does it deliver on that? And is it the best thing to deliver with?
But it could be then. Celebrity Treasure Island could be as well. Treasure Island,
those are New Zealanders, and they are New Zealanders that other New Zealanders wish to see.
So are the F-Boys, I suppose. What about sports? Could ANZPM go and spend their money on the Olympics or the All Blacks? Could they chase those big...
In this again...
Would that be public interest?
Well, it is. I would say that any New Zealanders particularly have a real interest in sports. Sure. They are their heroes. There is a lot to be said for younger women seeing the Silver Ferns and so on. So there's a lot to be said for that. But it's more likely, because of the price of content and the price of these things, that relationships will be formed with others because we know that content prices are rising.
I want to talk about the Editorial Independence as well. This has come up from Simon Power at the Select Committee. He said, Simon Power says he sees a risk of a return to a Muldoon era because this will be answerable directly to a minister. So why is that?
Well, I don't agree with him. So that's the first thing. So the business case group, which I was the chair of, spent a lot of time looking at the entity shape. So you've got an ICE, an ACE or a Crown company. Now, TVNZ wishes to remain a Crown company. I understand it. They like what they've got. They don't want to shift from that model. They believe, and they've argued for that. The business case believed that an autonomous Crown entity for a new entity, not TVNZ and RNZ smashed together, for a new entity was the best way to make sure that everybody understood this is a public media entity partially supported by commercial revenue. Its goals must be the delivery of public media in the first instance, not commercial revenue. While you still need some, that is not its major goal. With regard to editorial independence, there have been, I've read all of the 920 submissions that went to the Select Committee. There are some good ideas in there. I don't believe we need to change the entity shape, but I think there are ways that we can strengthen the editorial independence in the ledge.
Okay.
I don't have control over that, but I think there are some good ideas.
But you think there's value in that?
Oh, I think that
not being answerable to a minister, because that trust is crucial, isn't it, in a media organisation?
And not being answerable to a minister is, I don't believe that's what the legislation says now. what it says, the bit that everybody's focused on is they're focused on that the minister can ask the board to have regard for government policy. And having been on a number of boards, the board can get the letter, which is OIA-able, so it's all transparent from the minister. They can consider it. They can write back to the minister and say, thank you, we gave regard to it, we're not going to do it. And all of that is OIA-able, yeah.
Well, Tracey Martin, there is so much more I want to talk to you about, but we just don't have the time. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Nation this morning.
Thank you.